Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle, where we cover every Big Ten football team. I'm JR with Big Jeff for another Big Jeff's Insights episode. Jeff made quite a stir last episode with his 10 truth bombs and his lies about the Big Ten in 2025. One thing he talked about was 5 teams in the Big Ten who can win a national championship in this era of college football. Nebraska fans were very upset because they were not included. We love you, Nebraska fans, but Jeff is setting out to defend his take tonight while also giving you insights on why the 5 teams in the Big Ten are the ones who can win a national championship: Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and USC. So if you love natties and you're on YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe and give us a comment. Drop us a 5-star review on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to. Follow us on Twitter/X, TikTok, Instagram, all of those at the Big Ten Huddle. And don't forget, you can listen to the Big Ten Huddle every Monday through Friday on the podcast platform of your choice or live on YouTube at 9 p.m. on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights. Become a member on YouTube, subscribe to our basketball channel as well, and also get yourself some Big Ten Huddle merch down below using the links. Now, to bring in the guy, he's no Dave Portnoy, but we like him better that way. Let's bring in Big Jeff. Jeff, Dave Portnoy, yay, nay? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't like it only because ESPN, we already have the pro-Michigan guy who can't hide it, Desmond Howard, who drives me nuts. And Michigan fans, don't get mad at me. You have some really good guys like Jake Butt, who does a great job of being, level-headed and analyzing Ohio State. So it's just another, major cover of the sport that's going to have potentially a big pro-Michigan slant, and I don't like that. Now, some people think, there's all these Ohio State guys on and everything. I think the Ohio State guys like Herbster actually try to downplay, Ohio State, and that actually ticks Ohio State fans off. So, but who knows? I think that guy's smart enough, though, where he's not going to – I would think he would downplay it some, but you never know. Desmond hasn't, right? He's been choosing Michigan to beat Ohio State for 15 straight years.
Did you watch the intro video of him talking about being on Big Noon Kickoff?
I have not. I know loves in the chain of.
It was all about how they don't have any Michigan representation on there, and so he's going to be a big Michigan homer for him and everything. So yeah, your hope will not come through. He is pro Michigan. That's all he'll be.
Well, at least there'll be one thing that will be cool. Urban Meyer on there. If he doesn't like something, he says, "Look out!" Urban won't hold back.
I'm looking forward to the pizza reviews. There has to be at least one pizza review every episode, I feel like. So give me the pizza reviews. Let's learn about some of the pizza places in the college towns. That will be one positive of this, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of wild given how many times Ohio State's going to be on there. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. That we will. Jeff, you doing all right before we get into it? Doing good? Son doing good? Recovery going okay?
He's got it. So for those who know, my son, rising junior, was going to be a starting wide receiver. He broke his collarbone in a 7-on-7 a month ago. First PT appointment is Tuesday. So we are hoping he can recover in 4 months. I'll keep you all up to date so he can make the last 4 games of the season. So unfortunately, in high school sports, you can't redshirt. You get an injury. I mean, it really has magnified how, in college, you get that red shirt. It actually is good for you in a way. You can mature, weight train another year, get used to the college game. None of that in high school, right? It's a lost year. So it's just so sad. Injuries suck.
It is. Well, we're praying for good news and hoping the physical therapy and everything goes well. We had Max here early in the chat, and Max is upset with Kirby Smart, or as he'll call Kirby Dumb here in a second. Kirby Smart is an absolute clown. His disrespect of the Big Ten and Indiana specifically is 100% due to his insecurity of being able to compete going forward due to recent changes in recruiting and NIL. He says Kirby Dumb, asterisk, apologize for misspelling his last name. I saw that interview that he did with was it Rick or Rick Neuheisel? I think it's Rick Neuheisel.
Rick.
I saw that what he did. I don't think he ever specifically mentioned Indiana. I thought he was talking about SMU the entire time. I'll be honest. I thought he was talking about SMU because I also saw the comment where he said the two conferences are above everybody else. So that was my thought, was like, oh, he's talking about SMU and how he doesn't like them and how he's not for them. So, Max, I'm not saying you're wrong by any means. My guy Juck took it the same way as you, as an Indiana slander type of deal. Did you see that interview there, Jeff?
I did not, but I could tell you Indiana is the one team when they talk about strengths of schedule and everything. Indiana is the linchpin to all that, unfortunately. And then unfortunately, Indiana only added fuel to the fire by, pulling out of the Virginia game. We're not going to go down that path. That's another conversation, but
no time for that one tonight.
Yeah. So it will all play out, though. It will all play out. I think it will be good.
Yes, it will. All right, Max, thanks for being here. Also, Doreen is here. Hi, guys. Hi, Doreen. Appreciate you being
congrats
here.
on your new show.
Yes, Doreen. On the Voice of College Football, I believe Sunday nights is when Doreen will be there. Just follow her on Twitter. You can find all her stuff there. And Doreen, as always, reposting the stream. We appreciate that so much, Doreen. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a supporter of the show. All right, Jeff, we got a lot of interesting data to get to. You ready to get to it?
This is a banger. This might be our best one, JR. So you introduced it well. So my 10 truth bombs and everything, the two big ones, Nebraska fans did not like when I said they're not going to get back to acting like a true blue blood, which in my mind is challenging for national championships every year. That's what a blue blood is supposed to do. That's hard to do. That's a high level. And then I was saying and keep in mind, this is with the way the current system is set up. So that includes the NIL system that we have, and then the revenue sharing, which I do think is going to help more teams than just the blue bloods. But my take is it's not going to help them enough. And so that's why I said what I said. I shouldn't have said can't, because that implies there's no way in hell like it can happen. Of course, anything can happen. It's just not very likely at all. I would not bet on it. I would count on it not happening. But I'm not just saying Nebraska. I'm saying, there are 5 teams that JR named that I said could win a national title with the current system set up. And the reason is, I've always said you need consistent top 10 classes to win a national championship. So that's what this podcast is all about tonight. I've done the numbers looking at the last 20 years to say, what level of recruiting does a team need to win a national championship? You're going to learn that here tonight. We're going to go through all the data. You're seeing it here, kind of summarized. These are the last 20 national champions. I use the 247 Sports composite. So that's the top 4 recruiting services. It's down to 3 now that On3 has bought Rivals. And
it was 3 for a long time because On3 didn't come around until like after COVID, I believe. Okay. So it was 3 for a while. Then you had like after COVID where it was 4, and then now it's back to 3 again.
Yep. And so what I'm doing here is saying, okay, if you won a championship, what were your prior 4 most recent recruiting classes leading up to that championship? So let's give an example. Ohio State, of course, 2024 national champions, right? Their 4 most recent years would be 2024, 2023, 2022, and 2021. Those classes ranked nationally 5, 4th, and 2nd in the nation. That is the 3.8 average that you see in that average 4-year rank column. And then the last column is of the prior 4 years, how many of those years did they finish in the top 10 nationally? And in Ohio State's case, it was 4 out of 4. Michigan, they averaged 12.3 in their prior 4 classes for their championship in 2023. In 2 of the 4 years, they were in the top 10. So that's how it shakes out. You all can see that data there in front of you. And so I'm going to tell you what the summary stats say for the last 20 years. There's 5 of them here. And I'm going to read those first, and then JR, I'm going to have you comment, and we're going to go deep dive on some of these, believe me. But here's the first fact that came out of the past 20. 16 of the past 20 national champions had an average 4-year recruiting average national rank of 7.8 or better. So I've been saying top 10, but 16 of the 20 were at least 7.8 in that 4-year average or better. So we're talking high-level recruiting. And by the way, later I'm going to talk about the 4 anomalies that are in the red rows here, the red font rows. We'll talk about those later. Fact 2, 19 of the 20 national champions had at least 2 of the prior 4 years in the top 10 in national recruiting. There was only one exception. That was 2016 Clemson, the Deshaun Watson national title, I'll call it. They only had 1 of the 4 classes be top 10. So having when I say you need to have consistently, I'm not talking every year, but if you have half the time, that's probably meeting the criteria based on the stats here, right? Now, the 4 schools that did not average in the top 10, and again, they're in the rows with the red font, they still recruited at a high level. They were all at least in the top 15. And the 4 averages were 12.3, 10.8, 12.8, and 14.8. So, most of them in the top 12 or 13 range, and the one outlier would be, close to 15 on an average. That was the Auburn year under Cam Newton. I'm going to talk about that more later. So the 4 teams that did not have a 4-year recruiting average of 7.8 or better, they all had one thing in common. So these 4 in red, they all had an elite level quarterback that played elite during the championship year and that was drafted no worse than number 12 in the first round when they became first draft eligible. So that's a kind of a handful there, I think I just read there. But basically, you have to have an absolute elite high first round type pick quarterback who played that way in the season if you're not going to have a top 8 or 10 average recruiting class. Is that making sense to you, JR? Hope I'm not confusing people too much.
No, makes total sense.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about each of those 4 teams later because the stats of some of those players are off the chain for the most part. I mean, they balled out that year, right? So I'm going to stop there. We're going to dive deeper, but I want to get JR's maybe comments, surprises, JR, things that kind of confirmed what you're thinking. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to say hi to a couple people. They're coming in a little late. We got Pit Snipe saying hey to us. JR, Jeff, Max, Mr. Reen, good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here. Trojan Fight is agreeing with us on the Indiana. Brought it upon themselves with canceling. Well, I guess we didn't say anything about it, but we were talking about it pre-show.
Agreed on that. They brought it themselves. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, he's referring to the first comment. Captain Optimistic and Sergeant Analytics. Philip is here. Philip, appreciate you being here. You're always here, man. We love having you here. All right. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, this data you brought together, especially since, we also just got the blue chip ratio dropping today from Bud Elliott over at 24/7. He does a fantastic job with that. It's really interesting that the Big Ten here, only with 3, unfortunately, national champions. However, the last 2 are them. One of them is one of the teams that had the average 4-year rank outside of the top 10. I think it's really interesting that you put in that every team had, except for one, had 2 years in the top 10 or at least 2 years in the top 10. There was only one that didn't have that, and that was that Clemson team that had Deshaun Watson. I know we're going to look at the quarterbacks here in a second, but to me, it just kind of furthers the conversation about Penn State. We'll look at Penn State here in a little bit, but I have some notes on Penn State that we don't have in the data here that I think are going to be a little surprising to people, and I think it kind of tells a story that the Big Ten is this conference where, you're not going to recruit in the top 10 consistently at most Big Ten schools. I mean, pretty much every Big Ten school. Now you have Oregon, USC, teams like that can recruit in the top 10 a little bit more often. However, that's increasingly more difficult for both of those teams to do it at the same time. However, it can. And Michigan doing a whole lot better. However, I am wondering how things will change with the House settlement and everything happening if things do continue to trend that way with changing. But overall, I mean, look at these teams and also look at who their quarterbacks were, even when they weren't, a team that was outside of the top 10 in recruiting. Michigan had J.J. McCarthy, who was a top 10 pick. Georgia had Stetson Bennett. I believe he was a sixth-rounder, just like Will Howard was a sixth-rounder. But pretty much everybody else here, Mac Jones, first round. Joe Burrow, first round. Trevor Lawrence, first round. Number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence. Deshaun Watson, I believe he was first round. Jalen Hurts. When was Jalen Hurts drafted? Was he first round as well?
I think he was second round, I thought. Yeah.
So still high up there. I mean, all these teams, Jameson Winston, other than Ohio State in 2014, Georgia, and then Ohio State again in 2024, which is just incredible that the Ohio State has had such great quarterback play under Ryan Day. But when Ryan Day gets a quarterback who is either not drafted or well, I guess I shouldn't say not drafted. Cardale Jones was drafted, but not drafted in the first or second round. That's when they win a national championship. It's just it's kind of mind-boggling, all that stuff.
Yeah, to your point, so on quarterbacks, what's nice is if you do have a top 10 like team on average, you don't have to have the elite quarterback, but you got to have a good quarterback. It can't be, Stetson Bennett actually played really well. I mean, the guy was like 25, 26 years old by the time he was a senior. It's just the fact. I mean,
he's a walk-on too.
But that's a huge advantage, right? When you're that old. But so you don't have to have the elite. But the point is, if you don't have top 10 level like recruiting, you better have the elite quarterback or you're not winning the national title. And we'll get into things are going to be different moving forward, Jeff. I'll have arguments against that. It's possible. This is just my take, right? But yeah, so that's an interesting take there, JR, is I would say at least a good quarterback performing well. They don't have to be, elite to win it all. I want to just point out a few interesting things. Saban, how incredible he was. There's actually two championships he had, 2017 and 2015, where all 4 of the recruiting classes leading up to that were all number 1 classes. I mean, peak Saban was 2017, and it was second time in 3 years where he had the perfect recruiting, team, if you will. And that's why he's the GOAT. He won 6 titles here, 6 times Alabama in these 20 years. He won at Alabama. Of course, he has another title with LSU as well. So he's definitely the GOAT. Georgia was impressive too. Their 2 titles in 2022 and 2021, 2.5 average recruiting ranking and 2 average rankings. So just elite classes. And we saw that, right? I mean, on defense, they're just, they got half of the Philadelphia Eagles defense is Georgia Bulldogs, right? I mean, that's not true, but it feels like it. Urban Meyer's 2 Florida title winners, 2008 and 2006, 5.0 averages. So that's really high, really good. And of course, having Tim Tebow, an elite college quarterback, not pro, but that's fine. You just have to be elite for college. And then he brought, he changed the game when he came to Ohio State as far as recruiting, which is a good thing. And then Florida State, you have to go back to 2013 to find someone other than Clemson in the ACC that won a title. They were legit, man. They had a 6.3 average recruiting ranking, really good. And Jameis Winston, I can't remember where he was drafted. It was probably second round, maybe first, but really good. And then LSU is kind of an outlier, 2019 under Joe Burrow, 7.3 recruiting average. And then in 2007 under Les Miles, that team lost twice, including to an unranked Arkansas team. They had a 7.8 average, which ties a couple other teams for like the worst teams with a, under a 10 average. So it's on the high end of the scale, I would say, without having an elite quarterback. Specific to the Big Ten, let's look at Ohio State. Their team last year average of 3.8. So that's on the higher end of the scale. That was a super talented team. But the 2014 champs, the Cardale Jones year, not that far off this team. The average for them was a 4-year, national 4-year ranking under Urban Meyer. And then Michigan, we talked about, they were at 12.3. We'll talk about them more in a bit here. And then the other thing that stands out, the Big 12, 20 years ago was the last one. Vince Young, that incredible game against USC where they scored under the last minute, 2005. That's the last time the Big 12 won the title. And, again, 7.8 recruiting average. So they were on the higher end of the scale. They were not elite in recruiting, but they had an elite college quarterback, right? That certainly helps. So we're going to talk about kind of breaking this out a little bit more, but JR, any other things standing out as I buzz through some of that?
No, Jake Coker was quarterback for Alabama in 2015, AJ McCarron in 2012, 2011. Jameson Winston was a number 1 overall pick, so there was no issues there. Yeah, I think we're good to move on to the next table here.
Yep.
All right, take it away.
Yeah, so this next table, so let's talk about those 4 teams that are the anomalies, right? Like someone can say, Jeff, you said top 10 you're needed. Well, you're wrong. You're right. I am wrong, but you need the elite quarterback. So, let's take the first one, 2010, Cam Newton. Basically he was Superman this year. These stats are off the chain. 66% completion rate, threw for 2,800 yards, 30 TDs and 7 interceptions. That's really efficient. But he was a wrecking ball in rushing. 1,473 yards rushing for a quarterback, average 5.6 yards a carry, 20 rushing touchdowns. 4,300 total yards, and he accounted for 50 touchdowns. Just incredible. So that's how they were able to do it without having a top 10, top 8, average recruiting classes. The next one is Deshaun Watson. Their average, they went 14-1 that year. They had a 12.8 average 4-year recruiting ranking, so good. But Deshaun Watson, 4,600 yards passing, 41 TDs. He did have a higher level of interceptions with 17, but he also rushed for 629 yards and 9 rushing TDs. So he even had more total yards than Cam Newton, over 5,000 total yards, 5,222, accounting for 50 touchdowns. So again, my point, this was the team that had the worst, the second worst recruiting average of our 20, but they had a game wrecker in Deshaun Watson. 2018, this one was really unique. That was Dabo's second championship. Trevor Lawrence, a true freshman, a quarterback, and had a great year. He didn't have to do as much because the recruiting was better. It was a 10.8 average, so almost top 10. So certainly this team was more talented than Deshaun Watson's, but he threw for almost 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. So the guy played within himself, played incredible as a freshman, really. He is just, that's why, everyone talked about him. And 2 years later, when he came out, he was the number 1 overall selection for Jacksonville in the 2021 draft. Deshaun Watson, by the way, was the number 12 overall selection for the Houston Texans. Cam Newton won the Heisman Trophy, and he was the number 1 overall pick by the Carolina Panthers. And then our final team, which is the final, outlier, if you will, Michigan, that was their first title since 1997. So 26 years, they went 15-0. McCarthy had the least impressive statistics, but they were still really good. Almost 3,000 yards passing. He had the highest completion percentage of the 4, 72%, 22 TDs, 4 INTs, and he really played clutch in the big moments in those 2 playoff games. Credit to him for sure. Michigan had the 3rd worst 4-year recruiting average. I have to mention, was the Connor Stalions sign stealing scandal potentially a part of this? Could the fact that allowed them to win games and beat Ohio State allow them to recruit better because they were beating Ohio State? Certainly that could be a factor. But one thing there's no doubt about this team, they were really talented. They had 13 players, and it was a Michigan record, 13 players selected in the 2024 NFL draft. NFL doesn't care about anything other than, do we think you're a player or not based on your tape, right? And so the shame of the sign stealing thing is Michigan very well could have been plenty good enough to win it on their own anyway, right? We'll just never know. So, but the bottom line is you don't have to have top 10 level of recruiting if you have the elite, high-level NFL type of quarterback, someone who's going to get drafted real high and just perform extremely well that year.
Yeah, I mean, quarterback play makes such a big deal, and sometimes we get, people who tell us that quarterback play doesn't matter all that much, and I get that. I think that if your team is excellent in other areas, then you can overcome bad quarterback play, but it's just so difficult to overcome, and if you have a top-tier, elite-level guy, like all of these guys are, right? Deshaun Watson, I know that he's not been very popular in his NFL career for a number of reasons, but Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Trevor Lawrence, I mean, these were all excellent elite players. JJ McCarthy was so good on third down. He always seemed to make the right decision. And I know we can talk about the Connor Stallion stuff, whatever. At this point, I don't even want to think about it until whatever happens. I feel like every time we talk about him on the show, I'm like, let's just not talk about it. I may be the only Ohio State fan in the world that feels like that, but it is. Jeff, some trivia for you. How many times in 2023 did J.J. McCarthy throw a pass when it was first, second, third, fourth, and goal? All those combined time, the entire time. They played 16 games, Jeff. How many times did he throw a pass on down and goal?
So total...
for the entire season, how many times did J.J. McCarthy throw a pass on down and goal?
4.
9 passes. He played 16 games. He played 16 games in 2023. He threw 9 passes. What made J.J. McCarthy elite was his efficiency, was his decision-making, and was his ability to keep the offense running. You saw what happened when he turned the ball over against TCU. That offense just couldn't function that way because they were so predicated on efficiency, taking care of the ball, moving the ball down the field so you can give the other team bad field position, and then that's how TCU was able to score 51 points on them. To J.J. McCarthy's credit, he corrected that for the next year, and you didn't see that happen nearly as much in 2023. He had his Bowling Green game and stuff like that, but everything, I mean, he was just such an efficient monster. Sherrone Moore, and even now, Sherrone Moore does a good job with third down calls and things like that. We have to give Michigan credit where credit is due. It was a very good team that they had in 2023. One of the best teams in Michigan history, obviously, and J.J. McCarthy was a huge reason for that. It just goes to show you don't have to recruit at that elite level. It's good to be around it, but you don't have to be at that elite level if the quarterback is excellent at doing what you ask him to do. Doesn't need to be a 4,000 passing yard guy every time, but just he is excellent and he's elite at whatever you ask him to do.
Yeah, but let's be clear too. You still have to be in the top 13 or 14 in the average in nation, right? You're not going to be 25th average recruiting class, have an elite quarterback and go win.
Like I said, you don't have to be that elite top 8, right?
Yeah,
you don't have to be that elite top 8. You still need to be in that range. You still need to be up there, but you don't have to be in that elite top 8.
And I'm only pointing that out too because, I did get kind of attacked. You're an idiot. This is a joke. I'm like, really? Because the data is going to back me up. Now
in today's day and age too, Jeff, if we're going to 16 teams, I think it's only going to cement more. I think we're only going to see more of this kind of barrier stuff go on because you're going to need the depth. As you pointed out multiple times, you're going to need the depth to get there. I think Nebraska can recruit at that level. I think once they get some momentum, they can get up there, and I think things can work out for them. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as some Nebraska fans hope it happens. Prove me. I hope I'm wrong. But I think they can get there eventually. It's just 16 teams, the depth and everything you need to be able to get there. It's just going to be a daunting task for so many teams.
Yeah, and I kind of jumping ahead, that was one of the things that, I mean, people think because the playoff has expanded, therefore many more teams now can win a national championship. And I would say not unless they're recruiting at a really high level. So that's where that breaks down. And so, and actually, I believe that it's would have been easier for a Cinderella like a Cincinnati to find their way in the playoff. Only have to win 2 games, and maybe you can find a way and you get lucky and the other team just has a bad day. I would argue in football, though, that's not going to happen 2 games in a row, even in a 4-team field. It could happen once. You could like win the 1 game, right? But Cinderella in football is not going to happen 2 games in a row. It's just very unlikely. And it's definitely not going to happen 3 or 4 games in a row. So I would argue a Cinderella or a team that's not recruiting elite would have a better chance in a field of only 4, where you have to win 2 games versus winning 3. And really, frankly, if you're a Cinderella, you're probably going to be needing to win 4 games. Let's just be clear, right? You're not going to get the bye. You're going to have to win 4, especially with the way they reseeded things. To win 4 games, you have to have depth, and the only way you're going to have depth is elite recruiting. You're not, I know. What about the transfer portal? The transfer portal will supplement holes in your team. Oh, our offensive line is not as good as it should be. We need to go out and get somebody or 2. But it's not going to create this tremendous depth. There's not enough money to do that in the transfer portal. You have to recruit well. And all the best programs you'll see are still recruiting well. The ones that are winning it, you've seen, and I just think that data really supports that. So let's jump on next to let's talk about the ramifications of this data for this season, right? For 2025. Let's look at table 3, JR. So we're going to bring up, and I'm not showing all the Big Ten teams because, we're trying to keep these to like 45-minute sessions or so, but a future one, we might talk about like all the teams. And, but this is the teams that are consensus kind of like probably going to be top 25 in the preseason polls. Where does Penn State stand, which many people feel, prognosticators think that they're the favorite to win the national championship. Well, where is their 4-year average stand? Their 4-year average is 13. So 13, which is good, but that's only 4th in the Big Ten. Ohio State is number 1 with a 4 average the last 4 years. Oregon has an 8 average. Michigan is a little bit ahead of Penn State at 12, and then Penn State at 13. Now, the other fact is only one of those 4 years they've had top 10 recruiting classes. And that matters huge because that's where your studs come from. And that's exactly what happened with Penn State. So let's lay this on you. 2022 recruiting class that ranked 6th in the nation for Penn State. Here's who they had on that team. Abdul Carter, who just went top 5, top 3. Drew Aller, obviously quarterback. Both their star running backs, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, and then their star D lineman, Denai Dennis Sutton. So this is why the top 10 classes are so important. That's where your superstar players are likely to be generated from, and you're going to have a top 10 like class to have them. And that's what Penn State hopes to ride to a title. The other thing going for Penn State here, despite being only the 4th, best recruiting classes over the last 4 years, they've got the best quarterback and most experienced of those top 4 for sure, right? Ohio State, probably starting Julian Sand, a redshirt freshman. Oregon, Dante Moore, he played some at UCLA, but let's face it, he's very inexperienced, so he's got a lot to learn. And then Michigan might be starting Bryce Young, right? Jared, no, Bryce Underwood. Sorry. And he's a true freshman, and he's got a great future, but you're only going to do so much with a true freshman unless he turns into a Trevor Lawrence. But Trevor Lawrence had really good wide receivers to throw to. I don't think Michigan has that. So bottom line for Penn State, folks, is they're really borderline on these statistics, saying, based on the past 20 years, the depth of talent might not be how it needs to be, but they've got a quarterback that if he plays like a true top 10 like and NFL draft pick quarterback and plays huge and clutch moments, which he hasn't been able to do to date, but he has the capability of it, everyone agrees, Penn State could win it. It's just that it's not going to be easy because that 13 ranking average tells me they don't have huge depth, most likely, just based on how the last 20 years is shaken out. The other thing, JR, before turning it to your comments, what about our Cinderellas in Illinois and Indiana? Doesn't really look good. I mean, and again, this is not saying, by the way, all these teams in the Big Ten, I believe, can make the playoffs. All of them can win a game in the playoffs. But that's far different than saying they can win a national championship. Those are two very big, different things. But Illinois, their average 4-year recruiting is about 45th in the nation, and Indiana's is 51st. And I know both Illinois develops great. Indiana's brought in some great transfers from James Madison, but still, they're not going to have the level of depth to make a run in the playoffs. They're just not. Could they make the playoffs? Sure. They absolutely could. You got to have the right schedule, and Illinois actually does. Indiana's is not too bad. But this is pretty interesting data here for at least our, project top 25 teams in the Big Ten. JR, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this just furthers my make or break position that I had for Penn State, right? Which was Drew Aller. And I think, some Penn State fans took that as I was hating on Drew Aller. It wasn't meant as me hating on Drew Aller at all. It was just, I think that he has to be exceptional in order for Penn State to win the national title this year. I think that he has exceptional arm talent. I think that he's big. I think he's strong. And I think that he's a quarterback that can be utilized in a multitude of ways. I think he has a very good offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, who can utilize his strengths, and he has two fantastic running backs in Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton who can help him get there, and the wide receiver core is improved. He has everything around him. He has an awesome offensive line. He has everything around him. It's just those late game moments, the clutch times that you were talking about. Can Drew Aller make the throws? Can he make the right decisions? Look, if it's third down, trust your defense. Don't throw the ball away and get it intercepted. Take the sack. Or don't even take the sack. Just try to get as many yards as you can, so that way it's only a 1, 2, 3 yard loss instead of the 8, 9 yard loss, right? It's not just about the talent and how good is his arm. It's the decision making, the ability, and the clutch times. I think every Penn State, not every, I think most Penn State fans would agree with me that Drew Aller has to be in those clutch moments, making the right decisions in order for them to win it all. And that's really what I was getting at over it all. And I think that you saw that in Cam Newton. You saw that in Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, J.J. McCarthy, right? In those moments, they were all asked to do different things, but in those moments when they needed them most, they made the right decisions. And if they did make a mistake, it wasn't a mistake that hurt the team too bad. So I think that's definitely a point. I don't think we're going to see both Illinois and Indiana both make the playoffs this year. I think that game against each other in week 4 is just too important. I don't know if I see both of them getting in, even with a loss. Illinois maybe could get in still, even if they lose to Indiana, but they'd have to beat Ohio State and at Washington and USC. Not saying that can't happen, but that's just a daunting task to lose to Indiana and then to go on and beat all 3 of those teams after them. And then Indiana, the only 2 games they could afford to lose are Oregon and Penn State, which if they go 10-2, they have a chance of making the playoffs. Don't get me wrong, but not having an out-of-conference game on that schedule does limit things for them. Sorry, IU fans. I know you guys you don't like when I talk about that. That's okay, though. I think it's just reality. It is what it is. So, but if Indiana wins 10 games and their losses are to Penn State and Oregon, they'll be right there in contention for it as well. So, but yeah, I mean, really good data here. Just kind of shows who can't win it all. Michigan. Maybe Trevor Lawrence has a really good, or maybe he has a really good, Bryce Underwood has a really good Trevor Lawrence season. But I agree with you. I just don't know if he has the weapons on the outside. Donovan McCulley would have to turn into a second round pick at wide receiver in order for something like that to happen. And then the rest, and then Hogan Hansen, Marlon Klein, the tight ends would really, really have to be exceptional as well for that to happen. Not to say it can't happen, certainly can, but it's just something that would would be quite the big adjustment, which I think most Michigan fans are aware of. I think most Michigan fans just want to see him make the playoffs this year and keep building on the Bryce Underwood stuff. I almost said Bryce Young. Bryce Underwood stuff. It's going to kill me all season,
Sorry. Yeah. All right, I'll stop doing that. I'll stop. I promise. No, I agree.
Let's get to the fourth table here so we can get through. I'm sorry. Go ahead if you had a comment.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. So on Aller and Penn State, definitely aligned. So let's go on and, so a key question is, could the need to recruit in the top 10, change moving forward, right? We've got the ability to leverage NIL and the revenue sharing and everything. I got some feedback. Oh, you're an idiot. Like moving forward, things are going to be way different and everything. And this is old data and everything. And Nebraska fans were adamant that once we start winning more, then the recruiting will follow. I think that's partially true. I just believe to get in the top 20, I believe that to get in the top 10 in recruiting, though, that's a harder thing. Even if you're winning, like a Penn State has had a hard time being in the top 10 in recruiting, which has held them back. They've had really good talent, but not as good talent as an Ohio State had. So there's really three reasons why I just doubt that the playing field will be totally leveled. So this first one is, NIL has been around for several years, and I know it's still evolving. But really, if you look at the current 2026 class, which we're seeing here, the top 10 rankings, you pretty much have mostly the same usual suspects. The one outlier I haven't read here is USC. And I say they're not a usual suspects because, in the last 5 or 10 years, they've had coaching transitions and everything. Lincoln Riley's been disappointing. So they haven't been top 10. But USC through the years has been a great recruiter. They're in the top 5 as far as number of players in the NFL and number of draft picks and all those good things. So, really, they're the only one that hasn't been in the top 10 in the last 5 to 10 years. But everyone else here, you got five SEC teams, a couple other Big Ten teams, all not surprises, right? Miami's throwing NIL money around, but they're still only 10th. So, so far, you're not seeing like a Texas Tech in there, despite them making a big deal out of signing a 5-star, offensive lineman and things like that. So until I see it as someone new getting into the top 10, I won't believe it. I do believe, that you're going to be able to, as you're through NIL, you're going to be able to go out and get a 4 or 5-star for sure. That's going to improve your ranking, but you're not going to be able to get the number of 4 or 5 stars yet you need to easily get into that top 10, I guess is my point here. So the second thing is, I don't think fans just understand also how difficult it is to win a national championship. You have to be really good and very lucky. So let's look at the Big Ten. Since 1970, so that's over 55 years. You can keep it there, JR. Only 2 teams have won a national championship who were in the Big Ten at the time they won it. That's Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State's done it 3 times, 2002, 2014, and 2024, and Michigan once, of course, in 2023. USC and Nebraska, that doesn't count. They were in easier conferences to get through to be able to win a title. So, only 4 titles over the last 55 years for the Big Ten.
But Michigan and Michigan in 97, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, 5.
I mean, they technically shared it with Nebraska.
5
but they counted as a
and you're
title.
right.
Yeah,
5 titles over the last 50. But basically, one team winning it every 10 years, and then the other point is, and thank you, Jared, for that. I need to adjust my article. And by the way, folks, all this is on bigjeffsfootball.com in an article. All the tables, I have full write-ups on this. But yeah, you're talking 5 over 55 years. So really, 1 every 10 years, and they've both been from the Blue Bloods, Ohio State, Michigan, right? So that's why I just think it's so hard. So someone like a Nebraska, to get a high seed, you're going to have to beat out Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon to get that high seed. Then you're going to have to buzz through 3 or 4 games and have the depth needed to win 4 straight games to make a playoff run. So that's really the third one is, just people underestimating the level of depth needed in a 12 or 16 team playoff to make that long run. It's just going to be a lot harder, as I was talking about earlier, versus a 4-team playoff where you only had to win 2 games. So I just think that's a big deal. Now, am I saying it's impossible? No. I'm just saying I would not bet on it. I just think it's going to be very difficult. And think about it. You're going to have close to Ohio State-like talent to win a natty. Maybe not the same, and so let's just ask for your teams. How easy do you think it is going to be for your team to get to that level of recruiting where you're going to have similar talent to what Ohio State just had? If you think of it that way, that's a hard road to hoe. So not saying impossible. And again, not saying Big Ten teams can't be doing much better. I do think Nebraska is going to do much better. They for sure can make playoffs. They for sure can win a game or two. I just think it's going to be very hard for those non-blue blood teams, beyond the 5 that we mentioned earlier, to have the depth to win 4 straight games to win a natty. JR, what's your thoughts on that? That's really my last topic there. We have a final table that's in my article where it's the current recruiting status of all the Big Ten teams. We don't have time to get into that tonight. We'll probably cover that in a different podcast, but it is in my article. But JR, threw a lot out there. What are your thoughts on some of those reasons why it's going to be really hard to have the depth needed?
Yeah, I just think that, a lot of Big Ten teams are not in the super talent-rich areas, right? One of the reasons why Ohio State is able to recruit at the rate that they are is because they brought in an SEC coach in Urban Meyer who had connections to those areas, and Jim Tressel, years before him, was trying to make connections there, but he locked down Ohio, and now you see a guy like Ryan Day taking after Urban Meyer and going throughout the country. I mean, he's even going places that Urban Meyer wasn't going to get recruits. And for a school like a Nebraska or a school like a Washington, you can go out to those areas and snatch guys here and there, but you're not going to consistently pull some of those players from, different areas that I'm searching for some examples here. I apologize. I don't have any off the top of my head. But just based off what I've seen from the recruiting, you're not going to see, Nebraska go into, Florida, I guess. Maybe it's a bad example. You're not going to see them go in there and just create a pipeline and just start going crazy. All right, Nebraska fans, if you do have a pipeline in Florida, I'm sorry. But it's just not going to happen as easily, especially when Ohio State has an elite recruiter in Brian Hartline who's going to bring you in the best receiving core every single year. You're going to have one of the best quarterback coaches in the country. He's a head coach too, but really he's one of the best quarterback developers in the country, and Ryan Day, and they're always going to spend big on their defensive coordinator, whether it's Jim Knowles, now Matt Patricia. We'll see what's going on there. But Oregon, they're up there as well. They have the Nike connection. They can get up there. USC, California is huge for them. They're tapping into that a lot this season. Michigan, their money has really been helping them in a number of ways. But not just that, Sharon Moore has made it a point to go national more. So, you bring in a young guy like that, bring in a young staff, and those type of things can start to change, but you're a team that really needs the brand in order to do that. Nebraska has really good brand, but they need to, I think, show that they can win that national championship in order for people to start saying, "Hey, I'm going to go to Nebraska," and bring them a natty back. So that means they need to make the playoffs and probably win one game in the playoffs to really start showing that to recruits to say, hey, come here, and you can bring Nebraska back at the peak, back at the top of where we were. And I think that's attractive to recruits if you can make that happen.
The other thing I haven't mentioned, and I think people underestimate, they think, oh, now it's NIL, so it's all about the money. Yeah, money is really important, but don't underestimate a program's ability to prove we can produce NFL talent. A lot of players value that just as much because they know that's where the real money will come from, right? An NFL career, that's where you're going to, make the huge money. And so the schools like Ohio State, like Alabama, like a lot of these listed here on this list, not only can they offer good money, but they've proven with the best assistant coaches around that they can get you and develop you and turn you into a high NFL draft prospect where you'll be making a lot of money. And so that's going to be a key for Nebraska too then, right, is showing that, hey, we've got the type of staff here that is going to prep you, and we know how to turn you into a high draft pick. And that's true across any of these other programs. Michigan's doing it with certain position groups for sure, right? And others, they're not. They're struggling with receivers because they haven't been able to show, I believe, look, we've got some really good recent draft picks. That's a key thing here that also shouldn't be underestimated. It's not just about the money. It's very important, but still, development still does matter.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Couple comments really quick, and then we'll get out of here. Tony says Washington let Ohio State steal both Egbuka and Tuimoloau from local Seattle high schools. That was brutal, and that's the thing too, right? When you do get those 5 stars in your state, you have to hold on to those guys. That was really, really brutal. And then, I mean, Dominic Kirks, right, was another one that Washington had. He's a player that is getting some buzz at Ohio State now as a sophomore. Could possibly play this next year. He was from Ohio. Washington had him locked up, and then Ohio State came a call, and like 2 days before signing day, he doesn't sign with Washington, and then he flips to Ohio State. I mean, that's the hard part, right? Is when you think you got a guy locked up, and they're coming, and then another team comes a call.
Those are 2 great examples, because I really believe both of those went to Ohio State for development and go make it to the NFL. Egbuka for sure under Hartline, and then even Tuimoloau under Larry Johnson, right, and believed in him. And you can point to Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa and Chase Young and all that. So, yeah, it was brutal.
Yep. And Steely Matt sharing the show, reposted the stream. Appreciate you doing that, Steely Matt. I want to recognize whenever anybody does that on Twitter and it pops up here. I know sometimes we get people who do share it. It doesn't pop up here. I apologize. I just put the ones up that pop up. So if you do share, even if we don't acknowledge you, we appreciate you doing that. All right, Jeff, great show. Very insightful. I think it's pretty firm in the belief 5 teams can win the national championship right now at the Big Ten is pretty firm. We'll see what happens in the future. I think there are some teams that have that ability and can kind of get up there a little bit more. So that's going to be exciting to see the future. But appreciate you being here. Tell them where they can find your article at and everything.
Yeah, so BigJeffsFootball.com has this article and many others. Follow me on X at BigJeffsFTBall. And yeah, this one was a little bit more data heavy, right, for sure. It's going to vary some. And next week, I think on Thursday, JR, I'm going to be covering like the 3rd day of the Big Ten Media Days, right? So we'll see you next week. That will be a little bit more light, if you will, and pretty fun covering that. It always should be interesting for sure. Hear what Tony Petitti says if he's going to stick his chest out and say, well, wait a minute, we've won the last 2 titles here. What are you talking about? Strength of schedules and blah, 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 right?
Totally. Fingers crossed, everybody, for good quotes from Petitti and Brett Bielema and Kirk Scanetti, because I'm basing the entire shows next week on those guys. You can catch us Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night live streams talking about those. That means if you're listening on podcast, you will get an updated Big Ten Media Days every morning. We'll post those right away in the morning, so that way you can catch those before the next day of Media Days. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Joe, for acknowledging Jeff. He does do great work, and Pit Snipe, great stuff, fellas. Thank you so much for being here as well, and the encouragement. So everybody, we'll be back Sunday night. Zach and I, we had a listener request to ask the question, who's this year's Indiana? Not that it will happen, but is there a team this year that's currently at the bottom of the odds in the Big Ten? Zach and I are going to talk about that on Sunday night. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.